In a now unlisted video, I tease the topic of the triple integration. I will let Leonard Peikoff briefly explain.
Further, I'm sure that at some point in history, Ayn Rand's vision of a triple integration between math, epistemology, and neurology will be achieved. And that by the spiral method, this will bring a whole new context to the understanding of what I've been saying today.
The triple integration is the integration of math, epistemology, and neurology. Without even knowing it, this channel has already started that spiral climb of understanding the triple integration. As of the creation of this video, the playlist that was named and based after the spiral method contains 7 videos. If we trace out the triangle I made in the teaser video, we can trace out the spiral path we have already taken. If you have not watched those videos, I highly recommend that you do for the sake of the new content that the spiral method provides. In the first video, I talked about the physics of reality as the discipline of physics currently can prove as true. Some people took issue with me using the term physics to describe the causal nature of reality, as to them it means only the study of. So I want to make clear that there are 2 different meanings for all of the 3 units of the triple integration. Physics can mean that which is physically occurring in nature, as well as the study of measuring those physical entities and their actions. Neurology will refer to physical neurons in your brain, as well as the study of physical neurons in everyone's brains. And the same goes for epistemology, but mental content instead of physical. The first video then is the start of the spiral path. The first point was at the vertex of math and physics. It comes before neurons and concepts. It is what allows for neurons, which allows for concepts. The spiral path begins with a universe that would exist even if there was no one there to describe it. The second video moves the path towards neurology, and a little towards epistemology. This video is about the fact that the universe described in the first video was described, and that there was something that could describe it. That describing thing was a consciousness, a thing which at its very least is aware of reality. This awareness of things comes from our neurology. The third video was on epistemology and free will. The idea of the video was that the integration of physics, reality, not the discipline, and neurology, the neurons themselves, not the discipline, force any perceiving being to make fundamental choices. That there is too much universe to take in and process at any one time, and that the being must ignore some objects in favor of others. The fourth video went back to neurology, describing the interaction between one's epistemology and one's neurology, that the senses take in information from physical reality in quantum bits, and the brain is wired in such a way that those quantitative bits of reality are integrated into a bundle of closely related groups, which results in a qualitative measure of objects first. It is only after we have developed the qualitative difference between objects that we can then turn around and ask to what quantitative, numerical measurement is this one larger than that one. The fifth video was on the physics of light, both the causal nature and the scientific history of the discipline of the study of light. This is the integration of math, physics, and epistemology. Epistemology, as a reminder, is the study of how we know what we know, and therefore any discipline of science requires that epistemology we discussed in video 4. The sixth video is the integration of video 5 with neurology, discovering how these quantitative photons actually become qualitative concepts. The seventh video is about how that neurological system of the senses seen in video 6 reapplies to the philosophy of epistemology. That by introspecting on the process by which we take in visual information and turn it into a mental concrete, that process of concretization, which is thinking, is a process of abstracting that qualitative measure from the objects. Abstracting, that is man's distinct nature, that which separates him from all other animals. As we can now see, we have been discussing the topic of the triple integration since the beginning of the series. Having reached the philosophical level in video 7, let's begin a new chapter, which will start at the beginning again, but from the perspective of a human being who will reach the philosophical level whether he knows it explicitly or not. To begin a new spiral, we will begin at the epistemological vertex. However, we will not start at epistemology. To restart, we could begin by observing the journey of an infant, starting as a blank slate and working its way to being a conceptual thinking adult who has both his own personal psycho-epistemological philosophical views and has studied the discipline as well. The system that allows him to go from a blank slate to a conceptual being is a matter of psychology, and is the basis of epistemology, one's psycho-epistemology. Psycho-Epistemology, Part 1. What is it? Just like in the case of physics, neurology, and epistemology, psycho-epistemology can be used to either describe the psychological processes of an individual's mind to which he may or may not be aware of, or the disciplined study of that interaction between the conscious and subconscious functions. For the moment, let's focus on the discipline of what it is we are studying, and then we can apply it to ourselves afterward. Definition: Psycho-epistemology is the study of man's cognitive processes from the aspect of the interaction between the conscious mind and the automatic functions of the subconscious. Let's break down the definition into some key words and phrases. Man's cognitive processes, the conscious mind, automatic functions, and the subconscious. Man's cognitive processes are abundant and come in many different forms, such as evaluating, thinking, concentrating, etc. But the key processes are those that separate man from the other animals. The key process is the cognitive process of abstraction, and the process of concretizing that abstraction into a mental concrete. The conscious mind is a primary, an axiomatic concept. It is that which is aware of reality. The only way to investigate how it works requires that we use that primary awareness to gain knowledge and experience of the world around us and what's inside us in order to compare and contrast how this consciousness works. Consciousness starts at sensational awareness, and depending on the being's nature, i.e., their nervous system's complexity, this being may begin at the senses, but the available conscious awareness might be integrated into a base level being perceptual awareness. The automatic functions of the subconscious are neurophysiological processes that cannot be introspected on. You cannot use your cognitive process of concentrating to discover the internal process by which a scene in front of your eyes is converted into memory via neurons. The automatic functions are a part of the biology and neurology of the conscious being. The subconscious is one half of the aspect of a whole which cannot exist separately. The subconscious and the conscious mind are two aspects of the same thing. The subconscious is what allows the conscious mind to file, order, and retrieve its knowledge and experience and memories. The subconscious is programmed by the conscious mind, whether through conscious awareness or by out-of-focus passive integrations. Quoting Rand, "The function of your subconscious is the integration of your ideas." Now that we have broken that definition down to its component units, let's differentiate psychoepistemology from epistemology using what we have so far. Quote, "Epistemology is a science devoted to the discovery of the proper methods of acquiring and validating knowledge." Unquote. Quote, "It is not the special sciences that teach man to think. It is philosophy that lays down the epistemological criteria of all special sciences." Unquote. Ayn Rand, Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. If epistemology is a science, and a science requires an epistemological basis, how does epistemology become a science? The answer is by having a psychoepistemology. That is, by having the conscious cognitive and subconscious automatic functions operating before discovering the field of knowledge that concerns our knowledge. For example, let's imagine that we know a child will grow up to be a philosopher of epistemology. Say we are reading his biography, but as the story goes, the man will not learn about the concept epistemology until halfway through the semester of his second year of university. This discovery of the discipline of how we know what we know and how we can validate it comes after the development of an implicit epistemology, one where the man had a belief or rationality of how we know what we know, and that things can be validated before knowing that there was a field to study it. This implicit philosophy that existed before discovering that it had a discipline was formed from the man's psychoepistemology. He did not require the discipline of epistemology to discover epistemology, because he had his own psychological processes, which are epistemological in nature. Psycho-Epistemology is the method by which man's mind habitually deals with its content. Leonard Peikoff. Part 2. How does psychoepistemology tie to the triple integration? Now that we know a bit about what psychoepistemology is, we can now ask, how does psychoepistemology connect to this triple integration of math, neurology, and epistemology? In Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology, Ayn Rand writes, quote, "Two fundamental attributes are involved in every state, aspect, or function of man's consciousness, content and action." Unquote. It is therefore important to note and recall throughout that psychoepistemology is concerned with the actions of one's mind, not the specific content. Math and physics. A newborn looks around the delivery room and his visual field is packed with stimuli. At this moment in his life, the information is meaningless, out of focus, and unknown. He started with a cognitive blank slate. He has no mental content as of yet, only neurophysiological actions, which are the starting point of his psychoepistemology. The action of taking in the content presented to his retina provides repeating patterns like circles, squares, polygons, which come from objects in reality. This repetition causes more connections, making finding shapes easier over time. The psychoepistemological actions are learned over time. Methods that will work well can be integrated into an automatic method as to reduce cognitive strain every time an object is presented to you. The physical objects, which can later be defined mathematically, are providing the brain both the content of reality and which actions will be the most useful for discovering them. The action itself is also tied to physics, as the action requires the firing of neurons, which requires chemicals and the existence of a charge difference. This leads us to the topic of neurology. Neurology. Humans are mammals, meaning we have a developed nervous system. This nervous system is what allows us to sense the things around us. When a sensory receptor cell experiences a chemical or locomotive change, a one-way signal is sent from the activated cell towards the central nervous system for processing. The processing takes in individual quanta of information and bundles it to nearby cells. The bundles get processed and bundled again later into different cognitive regions of the brain for whatever purpose they are needed for. This process turns quantitative information into qualitative information. The information is processed using physics. However, the specific actions of processing that action was programmed to function in a certain way. For example, a man is watching a national news segment about tax rates for the rich being raised by a new government mandate. The physical content is photons and sound waves. The neurophysiological response is a chemical change in the eyes and locomotive change in the ears. The mental contents are the faces and words coming from the screen and speakers, respectively. The psychoepistemological aspect is the automatic response that the news causes in that instance. It is the aspect that regards where and how you were able to store this new information. If his first thought in hearing that news is great, those greedy jerks deserve it, then his psychoepistemology has automized altruistic propaganda, meaning he has allowed his subconscious to be programmed by others, or by his own cognitive means if he has also automized second-handedness. The way in which you consciously or unconsciously process your ideas is what programs your subconscious to file in a certain manner or methodology. In order to know how to properly program your subconscious, i.e., in order to form a proper psychoepistemology, one needs philosophy, which brings us to psychoepistemology's ties to epistemology. Epistemology. As mentioned in Part 1, epistemology is the science devoted to discovering proper methods of acquiring and validating knowledge, and therefore comes after the ability to acquire knowledge, which is a process of following a motivation to focus on a content of reality and cognitively pulling out certain aspects of reality, abstractions, which are then filed into the subconscious as mental concretes. The more that attribute is cognitively attended to, the more plentiful the connection to it, mentally and physically, and the easier it becomes to retrieve it. Using Ayn Rand's objectivist epistemology, one can clinically fix their out-of-focus automized processes and can learn to file by essentials, which will lead to an increase in your intelligence in the process. For example, to demonstrate a possible way in which you could increase your IQ score is that some IQ scores require that you know what words mean, such as platitude is to cliché as sage is to wisdom, true or false. A newborn cannot answer this question, nor read it, nor see it in focus. A toddler can focus on the letters, but the words have no meaning. A child can be taught to read those words, but the word still has no meaning. To a teenager, the word can have meaning, but they don't understand it deeply. They just use it, sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly. It requires focus and effort, but not much, to stop and look up a word's definition, to focus on the genus that relates that word to its nearest neighbors, and to focus on the differentia that distinguishes it from its nearest neighbors. If that differentia is essential, and if you cognitively act to file that essential over and over, say by using the words in 3 or more sentences each, soon the meaning will be as automatic as the ability to see it visually is, and you will not hesitate in your answering of that question, thus increasing your overall IQ score. Psycho-Epistemology is one of the keystones of objectivism, one which binds the triple integration of physical reality, neurology, and objectivist epistemology into an inseparable whole. Unfortunately, psychoepistemology seems to have gone unnoticed by the majority of objectivists. You can see it in those that suggest that they used to be objectivists, but no longer are, a feat which would be impossible if they actually integrated the philosophy into their subconscious such that retrieving the objectivist philosophy was automatic. It would be like suggesting that one used to be a chemist, but later in life they denounced the existence of atoms. A feat of denying reality can only come from an irrational process, and an irrational process can only come from an unfocused evaluation of ideas which are not being defined by essentials. In order to be able to renounce reality without being able to identify the contradiction it causes would be the result of someone who has taken in the content of philosophies and sciences, but did not use them to think, but merely retain them in the brain as information as trivial as who Brad Pitt is married to these days. So, how do we fix this problem? How do we use psychoepistemology to our benefit, and to the benefit of expanding objectivism to its fullest? Part 3. How can psychoepistemology benefit us? Psychoepistemology, the discipline, can be divided into different fields of study, so let's distinguish the different ways in which it can benefit us. There are 4 major fields of psychoepistemology as defined by Harry Binswanger. 1. Theoretical psychoepistemology. The field of psychoepistemology which studies the basic principles of how the conscious mind interacts with the subconscious. 2. Applied psychoepistemology. This field of psychoepistemology holds the goal of instructing you in the creation and proper operation of the programs that control your subconscious. How to use your conscious mind to make your subconscious function more efficiently and effectively. 3. Clinical psychoepistemology. How to correct wrong automizations in order to solve psychological problems. 4. Motor psychoepistemology. How best to use your mind in a formation of a physical motor skill. Our attention for the rest of this video will focus on applied psychoepistemology. As we have seen from part 1 and 2 of this video, the physiology of neurons, which receive information from objects in the world outside of that nervous system's body, is the physical method of storing information. Different regions of the brain are related to different mental contents, which can be integrated together by neural connections. The idea of a light bulb going off in your head, that is the neurological connection of 2 previously unrelated mental contents connecting cognitively. Our epistemological method of completing that mental content connection, i.e. to integrate the ideas together into a mental concrete, requires a symbol, an auditory visual symbol, a word. That word requires a definition. That definition requires two things. 1. A genus, the set to which that word is most closely related to other concepts. And 2. A differentia, the distinguishing aspect, attribute, function of the unit, that which distinguishes the word you are defining from the closely related concepts in the genus's set. Our words are not formed in a vacuum. We did not learn all of these higher-level abstract concepts without the experience of reality around us at all times of our learning about them. These experiences are what create and shape our individual psychological mental sets. Mental sets are a form of retrieving information from your subconscious, such that you ready your mind to the upcoming situation. Let's think about an example. Say a child is attempting to abstract the higher-level concept furniture. The situation being that a child has grown up in a house with rooms. In these rooms were different things. The living room had a couch, a lazy boy, a coffee table, a bookcase, a TV stand, a TV, a radio, a clock, a rug, and a plant in the corner by the window. The bedrooms have beds and nightstands and dressers. The kitchen had a table and 4 chairs. This is the mental content of the child in regard to what the house contains. But today his mother has taken him to the brick. Upon entering the store, the child sees couches and chairs and tables and beds and TV stands and coffee tables, etc. He knows what all of the individual objects are, but he is curious about the nature of the store itself. The grocery store sells groceries, which is a fancy word for food and food-related items of some sort or another. A video game store sells video games of various companies and types of games. So what does the brick sell, he wonders. He goes to ask his mother, what is this thing, the word, that combines these household objects which are used for various purposes together? His mother responds by berating him for talking without permission, and has him punished at home for his actions. How positively do you think that poor child would feel in regard to going into another one of those stores? Or in regard to asking his mother anything in public or private? Or in regard to learning in general? If this is the norm of his experience with his family, he would have automized not speaking up, not asking questions, not to think, not to live. This becomes his mental set. His mental set would ready him to receive punishment for speaking or getting in the way. Walking around with that mental set, he cowers in the street when people call out to him. He is always mentally ready for his beating. We all would know that a child in an example like this is receiving psychological damage, which will take decades to fix with therapy. It is obvious that an abused child will have psychological issues to some degree. It is also clear that these issues will manifest automatically without thinking, something to which we tend to have pity for. Like a war veteran with PTSD, we are aware that he has automized the sound of popping with a threat of death, and that bubble wrap could result in a PTSD fit. It is this automation that occurs in all people. What they automize is related to their motives. The content that their motivated actions provided them results in the experiences related to those concepts. How one filed their knowledge and experience affects how efficiently they can think. So to check the efficiency of your thinking, you need to examine your methodology. You need to examine your psychoepistemology. The first thing that is important to check is what you subconsciously have stored, which can be done by asking the right questions. In order to ask the right questions, you need to properly set up the problem in front of you such that you can understand what you are trying to solve. Next, you need to concretize it by using clear, simple, dramatic, and diverse examples to help yourself think about it. And finally, you need to run a thought experiment on the concretes. For example, I want to know how efficiently my thinking is in regard to art and my sense of life. What is my sense of life? If I were to ask myself, what is my sense of life? Nothing comes up. The question is not a useful question. The topic is far too broad. So let's properly set up the problem. The problem is that I want to express myself through a physical craft like painting, but I don't know what a sense of life looks like. So what does Rand say about a sense of life? That would be important to know, and we can use her answer to make it easier on ourselves. A sense of life is a pre-conceptual equivalent of metaphysics, an emotional, subconsciously integrated appraisal of man and of existence. It sets the nature of man's emotional responses and the essence of his character. Long before he is old enough to grasp such a concept as metaphysics, man makes choices, forms value judgments, experiences emotions, and acquires a certain implicit view of life. Every choice and value judgment implies some estimate of himself and of the world around him, most particularly of his capacity to deal with the world. He may draw conscious conclusions, which may be true or false, or he may remain mentally passive and merely react to events, i.e., merely feel. Whatever the case may be, his subconscious mechanism sums up his psychological activities, integrating his conclusions, reactions, or evasions into an emotional sum that establishes a habitual pattern and becomes his automatic response to the world around him. What began as a series of single discrete conclusions or evasions about his own particular problems becomes a generalized feeling about existence, an implicit metaphysics with the compelling motivational power of a constant, basic emotion, an emotion which is a part of all his other emotions and underlies all his experiences. This is a sense of life. A sense of life is an integrated appraisal of man and of existence. This sets me up for a better question. What is my appraisal of man and of existence? Although my sense of life didn't change in learning that description, the part about it being a preconceptual equivalent of my philosophy of what reality is and my emotions integrated together will allow me to concretize some clear and simple examples, such as I feel good in seeing happy people. I feel good in seeing productive work being done. I feel good engaging in work and trading that labor to someone who will value the effort. Some things make me cry because of the injustice of it, and some things make me cry because of the justice of it. If I were to use this information to run a thought experiment, I would imagine myself walking downtown, seeing the people and buildings I walk past, and imagining the awe and exaltation that one building can provide, compared to the disgust from one in total disrepair. I could imagine how I would feel about the people I see as I pass, how I feel about the choices they made characterized by the clothing and body posture they wear. I could use all of this to ask myself, do I enjoy being a part of this example? Yes. Do some buildings make me feel joy and some make me feel a type of pain? Yes. Is it because some are aesthetically pleasing and some are ugly? Yes. What do I like about the ones I like? Is it that the form follows the function? Yes. What do these other buildings have that I don't like? Is it that there are features which serve no purpose? Yes. Does that bother me because it means the architect wasn't thinking for himself? Yes. Is that relevant to why I like the people that look confident and look like they are succeeding at their goals? Yes. Do I love humanity and its development? Yes. Are ideas important? Yes. Is my sense of life the same as the benevolent universe premise? Yes. Would I enjoy painting a man constructing a skyscraper? Yes. By delimiting my concern down to basic yes or no questions, and by using the information of what the terms mean and running through a thought experiment, I was able to determine what my subconscious stored in regard to these questions. The sum of experience preconceptually is a feeling, and that subconscious feeling is very effective at responding to yes or no questions, whether you want it to or not. But pulling up the information from the subconscious is only half of the process. We still need to consciously evaluate what subconsciously came up. There are 4 important questions to ask yourself when checking what comes up from your subconscious. Is it true? Is it good? Is it relevant? Is it important? Is it true asks if what you have automized is a fact of reality. For example, you have automized a form of helplessness, and your subconscious provided you the thought you are a garbage person, after you consciously asked yourself, why am I like this? You can ask, is it true? Am I a garbage person? You can consciously judge that this idea may or may not have clashed with the successes you have had in your life when acting to gain or keep a value. If in acting to gain or keep a value, and you gained or kept it, that is not the trait of a garbage person. You can also ask, is it good? Which in this case is no, it is not good to have placed that type of thought in your subconscious. If in asking yourself the question, why am I like this? was because you were trying to introspect about a topic unrelated to your personal psychology, like why you enjoy watching soccer at a bar with friends, but not at home alone, then the answer, because you are a garbage person, would not even be relevant. Is the response important? In this example, yes, clearly it is a harmful thought and needs to be removed. It is important in the sense that it tells us what we need to do about that thought. So how can psychoepistemology benefit us? If we use applied psychoepistemology, then we are concerned with making our thinking more efficient and effective, which requires that we check our subconscious for errors and fix any problems we may have. But once we have found those errors, how we fix them is also important. Even if you don't need to fix any major errors in your thinking, and you just want to better your thinking, the key is to file by essentials. Recall from parts 1 and 2 that psychoepistemology is tied to the triple integration, meaning that objects exist in reality, and the consciousness that is aware of that reality is aware of it being full of different types of objects. Every object has an identity. This identity is what makes it distinct from every other object. Even two identical objects have to have a difference in location. These objects with their distinct differences are filed in different regions of the brain and can span across the brain, connecting to other concepts. How these objects connect to one another in the mind plays a role in how easy or difficult retrieving that information is. What connects concepts are the genus of the various concepts. If the genus is not well constructed, how will you know what fits in the set? What makes concepts stand apart is the differentia, which is the essential distinguishing attribute that separates the concepts from the others in the set. It is for this reason that filing by essentials is the most efficient and effective method of applied psychoepistemology. For a counterexample, imagine a child that has filed the essential difference between a dog and a cat is the animal's sex. Here the child is missing the actual distinguishing attributes and will struggle to understand until he is corrected how a male lion belongs to the cat family. By filing by essentials, you are using what is essential about the object, which is what it means to be objective about reality. You are using the fact that entities have a distinct nature, and the connections that form from the essentials are essential connections, as opposed to some floating abstraction created without reference to something real. Psychoepistemology, the glue that binds the triple integration of neurology, physics, and epistemology, is a brand new science. And as of the present day, I know only of myself and Harry Binswanger, who have engaged in this topic to some extent. I hope this changes in the future, because if objectivism is to stand against people with their evil ethics and politics, then we're going to need more than just advocates for rational egoism and laissez-faire capitalism. We are going to need a heroic psychoepistemology which has automized the objectivist epistemology. To spout objectivist material to the public is one thing. To have the public see that you also live by it automatically is a whole nother level. If you like what I'm doing, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for notifications. You can also support my efforts through Patreon. Links are in the description.